Hello, I'm Jeff White. I'm an author and investigative journalist. This is another in the series of videos I'm making about how to write a book, or at least how I go about writing a book anyway. We talked in the last chapter about the research process, talked quite a lot about how to use Scrivener to do that research process. So what we got is a process where I'm going around the internet and I'm interviewing people, I'm gathering all this material, I'm sticking it all in Scrivener. I'm then taking notes from all that stuff, all those articles, those interviews, and putting that in a big notes file. Not in any particular order, but making notes from the things that I found, from the interviews that I've done, and making sure I make a note of where that note's from, where that information is from, so I can link it all back. So at the moment, what I've got is a massive file full of all of the information I've got in no particular order, and your head's kind of bubbling at this point. So what you need to do is to work out how you take all that raw information, all that raw data that you've got, and turn it into a chapter. And this is where I leave Scrivener alone, and I go back to my desk and I get a paper and a pen, and I write down what I'm going to do. And what I do is a bubble diagram. I take each of the big themes that I now know are in the chapter. I need to talk about this, I need to reference that case, I've got to talk about that incident, that person, that thing happened, and I write it all down on a piece of paper in a bubble diagram, and I link the bubbles together in the order that I'm going to do them. And it looks a bit like this. So that is a bubble diagram that I did, and as you can see, it's got all the big key bits of the chapter. It's actually from an earlier book. And what I'm trying to do is link those bubbles together. Now, you've got to link them together in a smooth line. For some reason, what I've found is the smoother the line between the bubbles, the easier the chapter is, the better the flow of the narrative. You don't go back and forth between bubbles. You want a series of bubbles, not too many, just the overview, the broad brush approach. That issue, this person, that case, link them together in the order. It's like, I've got to start with that because that's an exciting thing, or that's where the story starts, or obviously that's what people are going to want to know. And then I'm going to move on to this, and that naturally leads to that. And you're just trying to get a helicopter view. You don't want to go into too much detail on the bubble diagram because you get back into the weeds of it. You just want to do the broad brush approach, big thoughts, big picture, and link them all together. And that gives you the flow of your chapter. That is the narrative structure of the chapter you're going to do. Then it's back to Scrivener, because what we've now got to do is take that notes file full of raw information and fit it to the narrative that we've done in the bubble diagram. So we go back to Scrivener and we pick a chapter. And at the moment, the Hydra chapter, for example, I talked about last time, here's my notes file. And as you can see, it's 2,100 words, and it's not in any particular order, but there's all sorts of stuff in here that I know I want to use in the chapter, some good, juicy information. So what I do is I use the split screen function, and I go up to View, I go to Editor Layout, I go to Split Vertically. Now what I do on this side this time is I have my notes here, and on the other side I'm going to create a chapter outline file. And what I'm going to do is go through each of those notes. I'm going to have the bubble diagram on my desk, and I'm going to try and put those notes into the order that the bubble diagram is in. So what I end up with is all of the raw information that was in the notes file, but in the order that I want it in terms of the narrative I've outlined on that bubble diagram. So the chapter outline looks something like this. So this is the chapter outline for Hydra. Now, I've started to almost, in this chapter outline, start to write sentences, because as I'm trying to put the notes in from the notes file, I sort of start to think, okay, I'm going to try and write that in this particular way. So actually what you end up with in that chapter outline is not only all of your raw material mapped out according to how you want it to run in terms of narrative, but you start to actually write the sentences as well. And so you start to put together all the chapter outline, where you got all the information, and so on. And as you can see, the chapter outline is about 2,600 words. Now I know when I write that chapter outline, those notes into an actual chapter, it's going to treble in length. So that's going to end up being about a 9,000, 8,000, 9,000 word chapter. And at that point, I am ready to go. At that point, I have got all the raw information that I could get during the research period. The research period has to come to an end, folks. It's over. You've done the research. That's it. Time's up. I've put all that research in one place so I know where it all comes from. I've digested that research, all those articles, those interviews, into note form. And I've now put that note form into the order that I want them to appear in the actual chapter. So I am as ready to write as I'll ever be. And at this point, I have to say, for me, might not be the case for other authors, I feel super, super, super excited about the chapter. I feel pregnant. I would describe it as pregnant with information. I am ready to get this stuff down. I'm excited about the stories I'm going to tell. I'm excited about the interviews I've done and the way I'm going to tell the story, the twists and turns. So at that point, I feel ready to unleash the chapter. So it's time to switch gears, go into gear 2, go into writing, and that's going to be the next video. Feel free to like, share, comment on this if you like. I don't mind either way. But if you want to tune in for the next video, I'll see you there. Cheers.